Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Breer, and welcome to episode 45 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show, brought to you this morning by our good friends over at Salesforce. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest of around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday, straight into your homes at 8:30 BST, here live on LinkedIn. Before we get started, we wanted to make a quick small announcement. We ran a competition last week. It was a spot the difference if you didn't catch that when we announced it. We've now picked the winner, and congratulations to Steve Brown. Steve, Bianca will be reaching out to you today to get some details and send over your prize. So keep a lookout in your inbox. Today, though, I am thrilled to be joined by Emma Jones, who is the founder at Enterprise Nation. This morning, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be talking about how SMEs are being affected by this pandemic, all the support available out there, and what she sees for businesses on the other side of this crisis. How's it going, Emma? Thank you so much for getting up early to talk to us.
Morning, David. This feels comparatively late. I love the fact you say thanks for getting up early. The earliest one I did, I think, was 5 Live at 5 a.m. So this feels like luxury.
I mean, after a 3-day weekend, like 8:30 seems early to me, but I take your point anyway. So how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, good. We have been working very hard. So as you say, kind of the business I run is called Enterprise Nation. It's all about helping small businesses. And I've just had an incredible team in the past kind of couple of months who've just really kind of got to it, and we've hopefully helped thousands of small businesses. So it's been an incredible time, as it has for everyone. But yeah, we've kept ourselves busy and hopefully out of trouble.
Well, tell us a little bit more about Enterprise Nation. When did it start, and what's its purpose?
Yeah, so 10 plus years ago is when it started, and its purpose is very much to help people start and grow their own small business. So the kind of, I guess, the constituents we help, the businesses that we serve are small businesses, so 0 to 10 employees. And up until March of this year, the way in which we did help small businesses was kind of, we had a very physical part of the business. So running 300 plus physical events each year, from a big startup show, international trade missions we've run. So physically kind of bringing businesses together. But we've also got an online platform that connects businesses to content, to events, to each other, but also to advisors. So we've got a very strong advisor marketplace, so businesses can get that advice. And it won't surprise you to know that the platform has become very much the 100% kind of heart of Enterprise Nation over the past couple of months. But yeah, if you think of any business that's starting, whether they've got a question on accounting or branding or how to use social media, our job is that if they come to Enterprise Nation, we've either got content so you can figure out how to do it yourself, or we can connect you with an expert who can help you master that particular area.
Fantastic. And I mean, obviously up to 10 people businesses, I mean, that's 90% of businesses in the UK right now, isn't it? So that's a very broad group of people that you can serve and help. And over that 10-year period, I'm sure you've helped millions and millions of organizations. I mean, right now is quite a difficult time. Like, this is no secret. We're not kind of letting it out. Right now it's quite difficult for SMEs, isn't it? But what are you sort of seeing in the trends of things that entrepreneurs are particularly worried about right now?
Yeah, so I guess what we have seen since that kind of mid-March point is the first 6 to 7 weeks, traffic to our site rose by 200%. We very quickly set up a coronavirus support hub. And to be honest with you, David, those first weeks, there was this kind of dash for cash from small businesses. So small businesses were coming to us with huge amounts of questions around eligibility for self-employment support. Could they furlough themselves? You know, if a director furloughed themselves, what kind of work could they do in the business? The cash grants that came out from councils, there were lots of questions around eligibility for that. And actually, this is still going on because the government launched a discretionary fund a couple of weeks ago, giving out more. So good news, giving out more money to small businesses. But again, there's just been a little bit of clarity required around who can apply. So the first couple of months was very much kind of Enterprise Nation on respond mode. So all of these businesses coming to us saying, keep us updated with government guidance, you know, how does this particularly relate to me? So we just kind of responded. But actually, as of a couple of weeks ago, we've started to get more in the kind of we sense this shift, quite a big shift, from most businesses having sorted their kind of financial rescue package. So by then they'd figured out if they were eligible for certain sort of government schemes, and now very much looking about how they now trade through the future. So things that you all have heard on your show is lots of businesses wanting to do more online. It's the biggest source of content that our businesses want at the moment. Businesses looking at innovation, how they diversify, looking at different products, different customers, different markets. And that's the phase that we're now in, which is kind of natural territory really for Enterprise Nation, which is at a point when a business owner is thinking, how do I make sales? How do I hire people? How do I keep my kind of cash flow in the bank? Then that's kind of our job to say, right, how do we support you? So we've kind of had this two phase of response to just help businesses get through that kind of really frightening time where so many businesses just thought, am I going to have enough cash to get through this, to what feels like a slightly more positive looking ahead to the future, and businesses saying, right, now can you help me trade and figure out where my customers are going to come from?
But that's good to hear. If people are, like you say, they're almost not quite through that, but at least they know where they are now in terms of the things that were applicable to them. Because as you say, there's been so many different individual schemes, haven't they? Knowing which ones are applicable to you and which ones require, individual liability, sort of taking on those things. What do you think people can do to sort of put themselves in the best position right now? Because I guess lots of different businesses are at different stages and at different scales, but there are some things I think that are quite sort of common across them, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the advice that we're giving, I just think at times like this, you have to be quite basic in the advice you give, because businesses just want stuff that's simple, that they can just kind of take away and almost action. So the advice that kind of we're offering to businesses is almost kind of take care of three things. So take care of your people. So of course, everyone has had their team working remotely. Lots of businesses have put their team on furlough. So there's incredibly complicated discussions to be had around then how you bring those team members back and hopefully create still a great culture in your business. So kind of taking care of your team, really watching out for your people is kind of point number one. Taking care of your customers. So again, for those businesses that have literally had to shut up shop, we've been giving lots of advice on how you can just stay engaged with your customers. So using social media, these incredible technology platforms. And I know this has been spoken about quite a lot in the past couple of months, but small businesses literally would not have been able to get through this had technology platforms like Amazon, Nextdoor, Facebook, Instagram not been around. So just incredible ways that you can kind of keep up that contact with the customers. And then the third thing, of course, is to just watch out for the money. So lots of businesses have received these bounce back loans. So they've kind of got that cash in the bank if they've had to borrow. But of course, it's now more important than ever, especially as the kind of good news yesterday that shops, non-essential shops, are allowed to reopen from mid-June. What a lot of businesses, particularly physical ones that have got space on the high street, will be considering is, do I have enough cash in the bank still to get through opening up and bringing my teams kind of back out of furlough and back into business? So those businesses that we're seeing do really well are kind of taking care of those three things almost in kind of equal balance.
Yeah, and I think both in these times, but actually in general, then a lot of organisations sometimes get those things out of balance, don't they? So focusing on the basics is a good thing to do, isn't it? All right, guys. If you've got any questions on LinkedIn for Emma on everything that Enterprise Nation is doing, then just drop them into the sidebar on LinkedIn, and we'll sort of weave them into the conversation. But Emma, how have you found it personally? Because obviously, going from seeing lots of businesses face to face and working closely with your team to sort of being completely remote during this period, how have you found that yourself?
Yeah, tough. I'm very much a founder who likes to see my team in the office, which I know is terrible. And I quite often say to them, I feel like a dinosaur because I was kind of brought up from an employment perspective, working for a big firm of accountants called Arthur Andersen many years ago. And, the motto was work hard, play hard, but there was very much a feeling of you had to be in the office. Otherwise, people didn't know if you were working. And so I guess I kind of was always trained in that way, and therefore have sort of taken that on into my own business. So, but I'd like to think I've adapted quite quickly. The way in which we're working at Enterprise Nation, we're a team of 26. They're all working from various homes in different parts of the country. So, of course, we've done Every morning I send an email to the team, which is hopefully kind of like a happy little way, just like your show actually. So it's hopefully kind of a good positive thing that they see first thing. We have a team stand up every week. We have team drinks every week. So hopefully kind of the team has felt good. But to be honest with you, David, we have just been so busy, and it's there's an element of where I see people kind of say, oh, I've used this opportunity to learn a new language, or to to read all of these books, and I'm like, wow, I kind of really wish I'd had the time to do that. And this kind of links into the kind of contact I've had with the community. And by the community, I mean the small businesses that we serve. And as you say, normally I see them so often physically, but actually I feel more closely connected to our community at the moment than I've ever done. And I was saying before we started the broadcast that every day I do a lunchtime session. So we do a lunchtime webinar called Lunch and Learn. So every day I have a guest on who talks about various different things of starting and growing a business. So I'm kind of keeping up to date with kind of what our experts, what entrepreneurs are kind of saying and thinking. But the audience who come on, who are pretty chatty, and it's just every single day now I'm picking up the theme of what businesses, what's on their mind, what more they're looking for from Enterprise Nation. And of course, across social media means that you can stay connected so strangely. And of course, I can see so many businesses. So with Zoom and all these kind of technology, it's not that you can't see their faces. So I miss the physical interaction, but I have to say I have never, ever felt so connected to this community, because when you're just sat all day just working on it, you feel really connected, because of course we're not out in meetings and distracted by other things. So yeah, it's hopefully the community has felt quite connected to us.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think people often think digital is purely somebody doing self-service through a website, but actually digital is this, like digital can be more human than human sometimes, because of the ability to connect the dots remotely. You can give people support in far-flung places because actually you can do it at the press of a button or the click of a button. So I think it is an interesting time for those things. I mean, my one of our founders, Jason, was from Arthur Andersen as well, and definitely there is a kind of a mantra there, isn't there, with that? But do you think you'll kind of take any of the sort of lessons forward from this? Because I mean, I think definitely we've sort of seen from 11FS's perspective is people are as productive at home as they are in the office, as they are anywhere. So do you think you'll kind of take on board a little bit more of a remote working culture going forward?
Absolutely. And already we're doing it. So we're hiring a couple of new people at the moment, and we've just hired someone back to the business. Actually, she used to be in the business and we've rehired her back in, and she's based in Brighton. And I guess maybe pre-coronavirus, I would kind of think, oh, does that mean she'll only do a couple of days a week in the office? Our office is in central London. And now, of course, I'm just like, I don't care where anyone lives, because people, and as you say, and again, across social, you've seen this, there's certain sort of cohorts who are not happy that this has happened. No one is happy this has happened, but there are certain things in the economy that have been accentuated through this pandemic. And one of the groups that is kind of saying, wow, this has just taken on, it's taken us on advances kind of is the flexible working movement. So all those, I saw a lovely tweet from a lady saying, I've been championing flexible working since 2013 and now people are kind of seeing that this is taking off. And of course you always have to look, and this is why sort of movements in the economy are so fascinating, is that as that happens, those who are nervous are the office holders and the property owners who are kind of saying, well, what does this mean for the future of our space? But again, this weekend, I read a report from a co-working organisation who said people will want to return to offices. They will just want to return in a different way, to kind of have collaboration space, as opposed to necessarily just rocking up. And just, again, I read something brilliant yesterday, which does hark back to those Arthur Andersen days, is this person said, work is always seen as people saying, I'm going to work. So it's always been seen as quite a physical thing. I am going to work, when in fact, work is an activity that can be carried out from anywhere. And I think everyone now sees that. So yeah, we will definitely go ahead as a different business, having been through this period.
I mean, it's really interesting, that point around the real estate. I mean, we had Rajesh Agrawal on last week, the Deputy Mayor of London for Business, and actually his point was, hopefully it kind of leads to a bit of a level setting when it comes to costs of offices in London, because actually if there's slightly less demand, then actually supply will become a little bit cheaper for people. So, and as you say, I mean, there's been a really strong movement for remote working for such a long period of time, hasn't there? But now actually, both remote working as in employment, but actually the ability to do work for people remotely as well. I mean, we've found that banks in the US who have typically been incredibly, come into the office and talk to us, and it's like, well, it's a 12-hour flight, so this better be worth it when we get there. But now we're so open to just working with people, working with the best talent, regardless of where they are. So hopefully some of those things kind of keep going, because I think it will change the way in which the job market really works. But tell us a little bit more about, I mean, how did Enterprise Nation kind of come about in the first place? You say you founded it 10 years ago, but I mean, your background really wasn't in the SME space, was it? I think you were you studying Japanese at university, is that right?
I did, but my background has, I guess, always been in the SME space, because I grew up the daughter of a mum who ran businesses around us. So I think I've kind of, all I've ever known is small business.
As osmosis of SME businesses.
And especially by the fact she ran restaurants. So we literally lived in the small business, like above the shop type thing. So
Wow.
yeah, all I've ever known is that kind of style of life. But yeah, so I did law and Japanese at university, mainly because I'd gone to an incredible international college that opened me up to kind of the Japanese economy, actually, which dates myself. But in those years, the Japanese economy was absolutely on fire. And I thought, okay, this could be an interesting country. So I did law and Japanese, joined Arthur Andersen to help Japanese companies locate into the UK. So over the 5-year career I had with Arthur Andersen, what I ended up doing was I built for them what was called an inward investment unit. So this is where at Arthur Andersen, we attracted lots of different clients from all parts of the world eventually. And my job was to kind of build a unit that says, right, here's how Arthur Andersen can help you when you land in the UK. And then it was the year 2000. So again, wow, 20 years ago, shocking. And I should imagine, actually, David, many of your listeners will have been around and kind of active in this period, because it was the dot-com period. So I was at Arthur Andersen. I was working in Manchester at the time. I'd gone from London to Manchester offices, and I was reading about all of these amazing dot-com companies raising loads of money, changing the way that we operated. And I thought, actually, I want to do that. I want to take the inward investment process, so this idea of all these companies coming into the UK, and I want to make it better and more efficient. So I launched a first business in the height of the dot-com boom, which was called techlicate.com. And what that business did is it built efficiencies in terms of helping international companies decide where they'd locate in the UK. But 2 years in, we had an acquisition approach. So pretty much within kind of a 2.5-3 year period, we kind of started, grew, and then sold that business. And the one thing, I had a lock-in clause when we sold techlicate.com. It was to a business called Tenon, who are still around. But I had a lock-in clause to stay with Tenon for 18 months. And again, for those of your listeners who've started a business, sold it, and then maybe had to stay on, you very quickly realize that once you've run your own business, it's then very difficult to work for somebody else. So I kind of spent that lock-in time definitely giving it my all to Tenon, but also kind of on the side working on what comes next. And at that time, I read a book called Free Agent Nation, which was written by a brilliant American author called Dan Pink. He'd been a speechwriter for Al Gore. And this brilliant book essentially charted the rise of self-employment in the US. And he was talking about how all these people were becoming free agents, but things in the US didn't match up with that. So the tax system wasn't quite right. The way in which the US counted the economic contribution of individuals didn't really count the self-employed, because it was all so new. And I just read this book and thought, I'm sure the same thing is going to happen in this country, and people are going to start businesses for lots of different reasons. And so I kind of went to where my heart has always been, which is small business. So Enterprise Nation was launched, first of all, to kind of recognize that there was going to be a shift happening in the UK and more people would go self-employed and start businesses. And when we started out, it started as a kind of a website and a community to help people start businesses from home, interestingly, because techlicate.com, I'd started from my spare room in a Manchester flat. And even when we sold the business, we were still a home-based business. So it's really interesting that in 2020, we're talking about remote working. In a way, I was kind of doing that 20 years ago, but not really realizing it was something special. So Enterprise Nation started to help anyone who was starting up a business from home. I wrote a first book back in 2009, I think this one, called Spare Room Startup, How to Start a Business from Home. And as I say, kind of pretty much over the past 10 years, Enterprise Nation has just developed into this incredible community. We reach about 250,000 small businesses each year, which feels a lot to us, but is still kind of small compared to the size of the full small business market. But this incredible community of businesses who are growing, still businesses are growing at the moment despite what's going on. And yeah, we kind of hopefully, as I say, give them all the resources to help them. So that's kind of like the trip to getting here.
Mm. Well, they say growing and also powering the nation, right? These are the the real drivers of GDP in the country, aren't they? Given the numbers of them. Some really interesting questions for you over on LinkedIn. So maybe if we sort of pull in a couple of those now. So a question there from Bhavin Shaw. So how do these customers value the advice you give? Traditionally, this advice has obviously been coming from somebody like a bank relationship manager, but they no longer exist or provide this type of advice. I mean, there's something really to be said for having this advice be given by a sort of an impartial third party, isn't there? Because I mean, when a bank relationship manager's advice always is a product that bank offers, then it becomes quite blinkered. But I mean, how do customers sort of value the advice that you give?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Actually, not one, I would say the biggest challenge in our world at Enterprise Nation is encouraging small businesses of the benefits of taking advice in the first place.
Mm.
And I quite often say this, but small business owners don't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I must get some advice and some support today. They wake up in the morning and think, I make mugs. How am I going to make more of them? How do I keep that cash in the bank? How do I hire people? And so in a way, our job is to interrupt that journey, which you should never really do, to say, hey, maybe if you've got some advice on how to make those mugs, you might be able to make more and better mugs. So one of our key challenges is that. So if anything, we encourage people to come to Enterprise Nation for almost immediate answers that they need to their questions. And then we say, hey, why not stay a little while longer? We can connect you with these great advisors. And actually, just the role of Enterprise Nation is we pretty much act as a marketplace. So our job is to attract the business owner in the first place, encourage them of the benefits of taking advice, and then connect them to the advice that's right for them. But it's interesting, actually, there is a definitive role for banking to play in all of this. And I know it's something that 11FS feels very strongly about, but we look forward to a day where we can leverage open banking to serve small businesses even better with support. So back to that kind of, businesses don't actively look for advice. What we would love to see is if you can see from a certain banking transaction point of view that a business is starting to export, or maybe they've just taken on their first employee, so you can see some payroll going through, we'd love to say at that point, hey, Bob, you've just hired your first person. Did you know that maybe now is the time to get some HR help, an employee handbook, etc.? So I think we can do a better job leveraging banking systems and kind of technology to give advice to the business. It's always a challenge to encourage the business owner to get that advice in the first place.
I agree. I mean, my dad, literally, one of his sayings used to be, advice is a lot less expensive before a problem. And I think that's a very good thing to kind of encapsulate that, isn't it? Because essentially, if you can be self-aware enough to say, actually, what would be the best way of doing this before you get to an issue, then actually you can probably avoid those issues and actually be a lot more successful in that space. You mentioned technology, and actually this is a question that came up. Deval Gore, you mentioned technology. Has small businesses increased the demand for tech solutions? Have you seen more people asking more advice around how to implement technology, or even just how to stay connected with customers in a sort of a lockdown period?
Yeah, it's the number one most requested content topic at the moment. And this was the shift a couple of weeks ago where businesses said, right, I'm now in the mood to think about the future. and we cannot deliver enough content on this topic. So there's two kind of types really of businesses. There's those who are kind of almost new to digital technologies, who are saying, right, I have recognized that from this pandemic, I need to have a website, or I need to have a Facebook business page, or I need to be engaging with my customers via social media. How do I do that? And then there's kind of a second group of businesses who, in a way, were accepting of the fact that their business was dormant for kind of a month to 6 weeks. And they used the opportunity to say, well, actually, the things that I've never had time to do in the business, like adopt cloud accounting software, look at how I use productivity tools to make us more efficient as a business, now is the time to kind of start looking at them. So and again, back to that kind of, we said this about flexible working, that it's accelerated flexible working by kind of 10 years. I think the same has happened when it comes to small business adoption of digital tools. Is the government have been nudging for this to happen for a very long time, and they're quietly delighted that in one stroke, small businesses have just had to go online because it's been the only option. And I do think that is going to be a positive legacy of coronavirus.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that hopefully there will be many sort of benefits, I think, in the long run. But I mean, do you think the crisis will do, lots of these things, like you say, cloud accounting, digital delivery? I mean, there's lots of different opportunities sort of for kind of innovation in this period, isn't there?
There really is. And again, it's so much of this is around the mental attitude of the business owner. And you can't convince everyone. And there will be some who just say, I'm going to come out of this, I'm going to stay the same. But I have to say, David, the majority of business owners that we're hearing from have been drastically changed by this. And many in a positive way, that they've been hurt. 3/4 of businesses have said financially this has had a negative impact on them. Of course, we've seen that across the economy. But entrepreneurs are a feisty lot, and they're incredibly resilient. And, a small business owner will take a lot of things before they go down. And so what they're doing is they're saying, okay, if that hasn't worked, I'm going to change the way I do things. I'm going to look at pivoting. I'm going to look at doing more online. I'm going to get some advice on how to do this. And so, as I say, and I kind of say this with crossed fingers, but the one thing I would love to see is, if we can come out of this with a fitter base of small businesses, that's an incredible place from which then we can say, now let's support you to hire more people, to export, to keep innovating because you've done it and you like it. And so that would be an amazing result for the economy. And somehow we've got to pay all this money back that we're spending. So we need these small businesses to make money, to then pay the taxes so that the state can get their money back. So it's all that kind of, if we can get that virtuous circle, that would be amazing.
Well, as you say, I mean, entrepreneurs are pretty good at sort of pivoting, aren't they, in terms of keeping those things alive. I mean, most of them, I'd say, probably don't even consider themselves entrepreneurs. It's like you say, if you're doing the thing you're passionate about, whether it's, hey, cupcakes or mugs or building banks, whatever, like if you're really passionate about that thing, then you'll figure out the way of making that thing survive, won't you? But I mean, there's been lots of things that have been done by the government during this period, like you say, the furlough schemes and banked back and all of the things that are sort of going on. Do you think there's enough support out there for small businesses? I'd probably say, given the conversation we've just had, really making these things understandable in terms of actually what they are and who's applicable to them is actually probably one of the biggest problems at the moment, right?
It is that small businesses have definitely wanted clarity, and I've felt for the government in so much of this, because they've worked at pace to get these programs, to get this money out. So of course there's going to be a couple of anomalies where people are saying, oh, but what about this? And they just hadn't thought about it. I do feel, I think I'm potentially in the minority on this, but I do feel the government has done a sufficiently good job of getting support out to small businesses. There are two groups who continue not to be hugely happy, and you may have heard this across 11FS community, is the newly self-employed have not been eligible for anything, because self-employment income support only applies if you've been self-employed for more than 12 months. And there's another very big group who are not too happy, who are limited company directors who've paid themselves via dividends as opposed to PAYE. And actually, I think the Chancellor did a Twitter Q&A last week where he explained the reason why they've really struggled with this one is because company directors pay themselves in dividends, which is lawful, legal, fine, but there's a huge amount of shareholders who get dividend payments, and the Treasury and HMRC just can't distinguish between them. So it would be super complicated to deliver support to dividend people who receive dividends, because they just don't know if it's going to the right people. So those limited company directors are not very happy. But I have to say, in the main, I think the government has done a great job. My only word of caution, and it was something that the day that the Chancellor announced the programme of support for the self-employed, and within the same breath, he alluded to the fact that in the next couple of years, there could be national insurance and tax rises for this group. And so I was kind of, part of me was elated that the self-employed community would get this support. And then part of me was just like, wow, we have worked for years to try and make the case that the self-employed deliver benefits to the economy in other ways. So, you know, they work from home, so they're spending more time and money in their local community. And I just kind of felt in one swoop, the Chancellor was like, okay, you're not that special because you're requesting as much support as employees, and therefore I will reflect that in my tax take going forward. So I do think that he will try and normalise the kind of tax and benefit system for employed and self-employees, which I think is probably one of the downsides that's come out of this. But if that's what it takes to get the self-employed support, so be it. But yeah, I think they've done a good job of trying to cover as many people as they could when it comes to support.
I agree with that. I think they've there was no break the glass in case of pandemic plan, right? They've tried to make it up as best they can as they've sort of really gone along, and really sort of gone back to revise things to make sure that they're not leaving any particular group more disadvantaged than the other. I think the interesting thing, as you say, is like, how the hell we pay for this at some point, because down the line, we'll worry about that next, I guess. But it's almost like we're having a really awesome party, and then we'll worry about how we pay for it later. But yeah, get on the other side, and we'll work that one out next. I mean, there are non-government schemes that are happening as well, aren't there? And I think you launched one recently, actually with Salesforce.
Yes, with your show sponsor, which I was delighted to see, their lovely blue logo here. So yeah, it's one of the things actually we've seen pretty early on. Big companies, I have to say, actually, mainly US tech companies have come out with kind of incredibly gracious responses. So Facebook announced 100 million in cash grants to small businesses, or kind of ad credits. That's launched in the US. It's not yet live in the UK. I think Microsoft made Teams for free pretty soon. And so the program we're running with Salesforce, and this is the thing, I think all of these businesses came forward and said, we think we have a role to play in supporting small firms. And, in a way, if the small business base stays vibrant, these businesses will continue to do well because they kind of sell and connect with them. So the Salesforce cash grant program, which we're kind of their UK delivery partner, is a brilliant program. It's giving out £5,000 in cash grants to businesses that are registered at Companies House with at least 2 people. And we've been running it in regional heats. So it went live 2 weeks ago today. So we went live in Northern Ireland. So that heat has just finished, in terms of we've got a shortlisted group of candidates. And then we go live next week in Central England. So we're running it in 6 regional heats, and small businesses can apply. And essentially what we're wanting to know is how the cash grant would help you and how you've been affected by COVID-19 sort of financially in the business. So and it actually, back to those limited company directors who've paid themselves in dividends, most of them are eligible to apply for this. So it could just be that kind of £5,000 lifeline that they're looking for. So it's a brilliant program. And as I say, it's been fantastic to see these tech companies kind of stand up and say, we think we've got a role. Here are the programs that we're going to roll out in support of small firms.
Fantastic. Well, it's really good to see opportunities like that, like you say, sort of coming through to really sort of support people. Unfortunately, I think we're probably going to have to wrap up now, because it's 9:06. Like, I have definitely not been keeping the eye on the clock today, so we better get going and let people kind of get on with their days. But I mean, Emma, where can people find out a little bit more about you, Enterprise Nation, and the grants that you're running with Salesforce?
Yeah, enterprisenation.com. Everything is available from there, so easiest place to look. And yeah, thanks for having me, David. It's been really nice chatting to you.
No worries, but great to catch up. All right, guys, on tomorrow's show, I'm going to be joined by Daniel Kleijen, who is the CEO of Tink. If you don't know, those guys are doing some really, really interesting things in open banking. The customer take up on that has been pretty phenomenal. So be great to talk to Dan and see what they're up to next. All right, guys, that's all we have for you today. Stay safe, and we will see you same time, same place tomorrow. Thank you very much. Goodbye.